In all of Canada's history until 2020, only 4 TV dramas made by and about Black Canadians had made it to air on a major broadcaster. Canada's screen output has been predominantly white, male, and heterosexual, even though Black people have been part of Canada's population since before Confederation. The system is broken, or more accurately, it was designed to exclude Black creators and Black-focused content from the Canadian screen canon. So in 2021, the Black Screen Office set out to identify the central issues that create barriers for Black screen industry workers and Black audiences. While Black people are uniquely marginalized by Canada's screen industry, the BSO recognized that there are common experiences across all underrepresented groups. Examining and addressing inclusion and authentic representation holistically would be critical for the industry to become truly equitable. The BSO launched 3 research projects: Being Counted, Being Heard, and Being Seen. With the knowledge gained from this research, BSO can work with decision makers on tools and strategies to dismantle the industry's anti-Black practices and improve authentic representation overall. The 3 research projects look at the issues from different angles. Being Counted looks at audiences, specifically Black, Indigenous, and people of color audiences, whose preferences are usually hidden within general population data in traditional audience surveys. This basically makes them invisible to screen content decision makers. Through Being Counted, these decision makers gain insight into who they are missing, as well as these viewers' habits and preferences. Being Heard looks inward at the Canadian screen industry. It offers data on the prevalence of Black workers and their experiences. Black industry workers have not been examined in any meaningful way until now, and Being Heard will help identify ways to support their success. Being Seen looks at Canada's screen industry content. Inspired by Imaginative's protocols and pathways, Being Seen explores the perspectives of screen industry professionals and members of the viewing public who are Black, people of color, 2S LGBTQIA+, and people with disabilities. From across the country, more than 400 individuals from these communities participated in Being Seen focus groups and interviews in both English and French. Participants included members of the screen industries as well as the general public. For the Children's Media Report, we talked to children's media creators from the 4 communities, and also parents and children and youth ranging in age from 6 to 17. Knowing that individuals have multiple dimensions, BSO took an intersectional approach to this research, which allowed participants to talk about any aspects of their identity. Letting participants choose allowed them to bring their full selves to these discussions. BSO also divided communities into subcategories whenever possible, such as a blind or deaf focus group within the people with disabilities category. This allowed for deeper exploration of specific communities. Within these Being Seen safe spaces, participants spoke with passion, strength, vulnerability, and at times, tears. They provided valuable insights into how Canada's screen industries can and must change to better reflect them and their needs. Many common themes emerged across the communities, as well as challenges unique to each community group. The result of this research is the Being Seen Core Report, which captures the universal themes shared across all 4 communities. There are also 5 companion reports, 1 in each community, and a Children's Media Report. Each report offers anecdotal insights on representation, as well as clear directives for industry leaders on how to create and commission more authentic and inclusive content. The data and perspectives that Being Counted, Being Heard, and Being Seen reveal establish an evidence-based foundation for change. This BSO research can and should support industry leaders to create and approve content that authentically represents the full diversity of Canada's communities. We also expect them to prompt more discussion and action on the structural changes that are needed to increase representation on set, on screen, and in industry boardrooms.
Okay, welcome everybody to our second Shaw Rocket Fund sponsored Children's Creator Workshop. First, I'm going to do our land acknowledgements. We'd like to begin by honoring the land that we're on, which has been the site of human activity since time immemorial. The Black Screen Office is located on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nation. However, as a virtual meeting, we want to also acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations who call this land home and host us today and every day. We're all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, newcomers in this generation or generations past. We would also like to acknowledge those of us who came here forcibly, particularly as the result of the transatlantic slave trade. Therefore, we honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. So this is being seen as, if you've seen any of our panels, read the report, you're familiar with where we came from, how we were funded, the methodology. If you have any questions, I'd refer you to the reports. What we're here to do today, and I'm Kelly Lynn Ashton. I'm the the lead researcher on the project. And I have here Hadiel Dowland, who is going to facilitate the conversation with me. Hadiel, do you want to give yourself an introduction?
Yeah, great to see a lot of familiar faces. Thanks for joining us today. It's a little bit about me. My journey as an actor really sparked a passion to be a writer-director behind the scenes so that riveting Black Latino-led content can be seen. And I'm also a proud board member on the Youth Media Alliance.
Thank you. So what we're going to do today, so yesterday we had a 2-hour workshop on the core themes and as well some of the key themes of the Children's Media Report. We will be putting up the recording for that in the next couple of weeks. So if you missed it, don't worry, you can see it later, but also it's not a sort of prerequisite for this conversation. What we're doing for this and the rest of the week's workshops is delving into specific communities. So today it's the Black communities, to talk about the specific, the stereotypes, the tokens, the particular challenges that members of the Black community have talked to us about, the things that they would like to see improved. So the first thing I'm going to do is start by talking about the Black communities. And frequently people refer to it as community. And one of the things I would really like to emphasize is that it is a group of multiple communities. And this is something that is a way that we are actually quite different from the US. So some of the key statistics, 94.3% live in urban centers, but it's no longer Toronto and Montreal. And I find this stat the most fascinating. The fastest growing populations between 2011 and 2016 were the Quebec side of Ottawa-Gatineau, Lethbridge, and Moncton. Never saw that one coming. I'm fascinated by that. And it's because of African immigration, which has been so big in the last few years. So the entire population, the Black population is 3.5% of Canada's total population, projected to increase to 5.6% by 2036. Almost half of Black Canadians were born in Canada. Most of the immigration in the 80s and 90s came from Jamaica or Haiti. But then we've had this shift where immigration is now coming from Africa, Nigeria, Haiti, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Congo. And one of the other things to note about that is a lot of those countries have French as a first language. So you now have more people, a higher percentage of people who speak French at home from within the Black community than within the English community. And then, so another one of those stats there is, while I said that 3.5% of the Canadian population are Black, 14% of the US population are. Only 10% of the US Black population are foreign born, 56.4% of Canadian are foreign born. And a lot of that is that this recent wave of immigration. This is important because in our consultations, people kept telling us that while they would watch Black American shows, to be able to see their skin tone, they weren't seeing their experience. One of the, as a smaller percentage of the population, so many members of the Black communities are living in multiracial communities in a way that they don't in the States. You can walk around in the States and your entire neighborhood is Black. And that's much more rare here in Canada. So these are some of the ways that people are saying they haven't seen themselves on television, even when they're watching American shows or UK shows. So I think those are the points I wanted to make. Now I'm gonna throw it off to Hadeel to actually get into creating the content that they're asking for.
Thank you very much. So before we begin, can anyone share how many kids shows that they can think of where there are Black leads or main characters, or shows with Black supporting characters? You can participate however you feel most comfortable. You can open your microphone and share ideas, or comment as well. Hey Arnold, yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's a classic animated series. That one featured a Black best friend, if I recall. So still not a lead character, but definitely a good, great show that you brought up, which does feature a little bit of Black representation. Can anyone else think of shows featuring Black leads or supporting characters? Here we go. Sonny's Quest, Doc McStuffins, Everybody Hates Chris, 16 Hudson, nice. One thing we are noticing though with all these great additions is how many of them are Canadian? Not a ton. Odd Squad, yeah, that's a classic. And so in truth, though, that does reveal how there aren't many Canadian-led Black shows, and that's why we're here today. And since we're on this topic, what are some of the negative impacts of stereotypes of missing representation, and what could that end up doing to kids? And similarly, you guys can participate via the chat function, or just live via Zoom. We have our first participant, Josanne. Take it away.
Yeah, well, this is more related to colorism and I guess depicting appearances rather than tropes, like personality tropes. But there's a tendency to depict Black characters with lighter skin instead of darker skin, or with looser curl textures instead of tighter curl textures. And what that does is it tells kids that in order to be love interests or heroes, even as Black individuals, they need to have more Eurocentric features. And that bleeds into academic achievements and career outcomes later on. And it even has implications for things like dating site partners, like who's able to get a partner there. So what they see in animation and live action is really important even at a younger age.
That's a great point, Josanne. Very true. I'll give everyone else some time as well to think about and brainstorm what are the possible negative impacts or side effects as a result of stereotypes and missing representation. You can feel free to participate through the chat or as Josanne did. And as you consider, like, one of the things I've noticed as well is how Black characters often in media may be personified as hood or coming from the ghetto. And as a result of that, the younger viewers watching, naturally not wanting to emulate that because it would lead to alienation in their own communities, may code switch and act white in certain social situations. And as a result of that, end up thinking that their culture is something which is negative, that culture itself being something which is not, represented accurately in media. And so ultimately it just changes the narrative and allows a community of people, or various communities rather, to be seen as something as though they're not. And so that's, in my view, one of the important aspects of ensuring why we should not lean into stereotypes and ensure that there's accurate representation. Does anyone else have any additions for the negative impacts of stereotypes and lack of representation?
Hi, Georgina. I guess what there's two things. I noticed that they're always the villain, so that's one thing. Or they're just like the best friend that you don't really get to know them in a real way. It still centers around the lead white character, and then there's the Black friend, and maybe there's a Mexican friend and an Asian friend, but they're just kind of side characters that you meet occasionally without any real story, or so that could be negative.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I've seen my fair share of action comedies where there's the Black best friend and they're just there for the comedic relief and there's no real depth, to their character aside from that. So it's definitely important to have them be fully realized characters. All right. If no one else has anything else to add, I think we can move to the next slide.
What I thought of was really interesting about this first comment is the solution that the parent found, that he couldn't see positive representations of families like his and kids like his. So he recorded his kids and then would play them back on television. So it's, some pretty basic problem solving, but it tells you what's missing there. And then another parent saying, so many single parents, and it's single moms in the representation of Black families and Black kids. And Hadiel, I think you had a comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing which is interesting in regards to that is, if we look at like the statistics, that is something which is always not prevalent. And especially as Kalyan had mentioned previously, depending on which part of the Black community, that may be more or less prevalent. Like if you look at, for instance, like Nigerian television or film, the idea of a Black family having both parents involved in that child's life is just commonplace. And so they have media which is reflective of that. Whereas here in the West, in Canada and the United States, for some reason, there's this narrative that that's not always the case. And that is then purported in the media people are consuming, which interestingly enough creates that statistic. So if you can, for instance, if you're a Black individual, comes from a two-parent household, but you're seeing in media that it's always single-parent households, that just normalizes the idea that you could start a single-parent household, and it just ends up becoming a domino effect. And that's what the importance is of accurate representation and ensuring that there are just positive ways that people from Black communities are being represented in media.
Yeah, we can take that slide down. One of the directives that we've got is, I talked earlier about the difference between the Black Canadian community and identities and Americans. And this is something, as I said, we heard a lot about. So one of our directives is to understand, like, don't just write in a Black character. You have to understand where that character is coming from, the community and the identity, do the research, and, think about where. It's also demographics in the country. Where are they from? So in the directive, it says there are Jamaican Canadians everywhere in Canada, but a Jamaican Canadian in Toronto is going to have a different life experience, for example, than if they were in Vancouver, where they were one of a handful of Jamaican Canadians. So we really want you to do the work and to do the research when you're developing characters, and not just think of it as, I'm throwing in a Black character. I'm going to pass it to Hadiel.
Mhm. So move on to our next slide, please. Excellent. So here we have a few shows, some Canadian, some American. The Canadian ones are Overlord and the Underwoods and Star Falls, which I was also in. And the American ones, you have a couple iconic ones, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Blackish. And so I'd like to throw it to everyone watching. What would you say are some of the cultural differences between the American and Canadian Black family sitcoms you see in front of you? And you could even refer just to how these characters are presented, not even going into the shows specifically, if you haven't had a chance to actually check them out. So yeah, what are some of the cultural differences you notice off the bat, for better or for worse? We'll give everyone some time to meditate on this one. Lots of details. Yep. Blended families, Renata just commented. Both Canadian Black family sitcoms feature blended families. Both American ones feature Black only families, which is very interesting. Does anyone else notice anything else about them? Suburban setting. Across, I believe across all of them, yep, they have a suburban setting. Something I've noticed off the bat is how the both American sitcoms, Fresh Prince and Blackish, feature sort of like this hip hop, edgy, cool aesthetic, whereas Star Falls and Overlord and the Underwoods are a lot more sort of like conservative, a little bit more casual and modern. So we can immediately see like a difference in like Black culture, just in what the characters are wearing in regards to accessories.
So I'm going to ask Hadiel, do you think the mixed families, the fact that that's what we're doing more in Canada, do you think it's because we have more multiracial families here, or is it because it's more palatable? So the broadcaster thinks it's going to have a wider audience.
Right. No, that's a great question. I think it is less so results of that we have more interracial families, and more so, I think in the US, it's a little bit more of maybe a political thing. Like you want to showcase a Black only family because it's sort of like showing pride in that you're marrying someone who's part of your culture. It's sort of verifying your own identity. And to have a blended family in the US, sometimes it's seen as almost like you're selling out. You're not really tied to your culture. You don't have passion for your culture. And so to showcase in their view sort of a proud Black family, all members of that family typically is Black. And that is also, I think, reflective as well in the types of storylines we see in American shows. versus Black Canadian shows, for instance, in Blackish and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the storylines tend to be about social issues related to the Black experience. When you look at Star Falls and Overlord and the Underworlds, for the most part, it's really entertainment. You know, you feature diverse characters, but it's really there for laughs, for the enjoyment of the viewers. And something else I've noticed just in checking out all these series is the fact that the Black American series tend to highlight the actual location it's shot in and set in. So if it's set in New York, they will say it's New York. Whereas in Canadian sitcoms, they usually use fictional locations. Like Star Falls is set in Port Hope in Canada. It was shot here. It's a Nickelodeon show. It's on YTV. But they don't actually say it's in Port Hope. They call it Star Falls. So there's sort of this sense of like nationalism and sort of pride in the location for American Black sitcoms. And with Canada, that's less so the case. They want to ensure that it can play in various territories throughout the world.
Which I would think would impact what we're going after in terms of authenticity. If it's not fixed into a location, then how accurate can it be? Or how,
That's true.
Authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Just throwing those ideas out there.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. Oh, jump in, Georgina.
I was just thinking though, I mean, I know that exists here in Canada, but do you think that's just because we want, like, you're trying to sell the show? Like every Canadian is like, oh, we want to sell the show in the US. And so you get the feedback where you don't want it to feel too Canadian. So that's kind of why they take away the names of the cities, or it's very rare, to see a show that takes place in Canada and you're like announce it because you want it to sell, and it's just kind of, I was thinking that's more what it is, but I don't know. Maybe that's just my opinion.
I think it's the way things have always been done, but I'm not sure it's the way that things need to be done. If you look at Kim's Convenience, that was always very clearly set in Toronto. Schitt's Creek was not. So, both have been very successful going different ways. I think it's just something, this is another one of those things that I think we need to think about and not automatically do. Perhaps there are ways to be creative while centering a story in a specific location.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Especially
if you're choosing a location which enhances the story, then by all means have that be something which is addressed in the plot.
Right. And I see Renata pointed out Turning Red. That was also definitely Toronto based. Though that did lead that one critic to say that it didn't apply to him since it was based in Toronto and about a preteen girl, Chinese girl and all that. But we're not letting him.
Yeah, we can't worry about those people. Okay.
Okay, so I think if we look at some of the other directives that we've got, they're all pretty sort of linked or maybe even like a step ladder. So one of them is understanding the physical appearance and voice of different Black communities to ensure that your casting reflects those different cultures. And another term for this is cultural competency. So when we keep saying do the research, and it's also understand the community that you're centering or the character is coming from, because there are very specific ways that some communities look, talk, walk, and some people will notice if, for example, because I've seen this, cast a Jamaican Canadian as a Somali. There are differences, and we don't want to generalize, but there are regionally specific racial differences. Did you want to expand on that?
Absolutely, yeah. So to Kelly Lynn's point, we don't want to generalize, but people, for instance, from Congo and Nigeria have a different body shape from one another. People from the Caribbean are often mixed with white, Hispanic, or indigenous heritage, myself included. And in some islands where there are indentured, laborers from India, they could be mixed with Indian heritage as well. And people from older Black Canadian communities could have backgrounds that include white and indigenous heritage. And if a character's heritage is important, it's important to do research to understand the common physical characteristics of that community as well. And many people, for instance, will know if you cast a Jamaican to play Somali. It also extends to more like cultural nuances, such as the way people walk and talk and dress. And it's important to be careful as well in voice work and hiring voice actors in animation. For instance, casting Black voice performers for Black characters. And more so than that, it's important to ensure that the direction that the voice director takes doesn't encourage stereotypical views on what a Black character should sound like. We should ensure that the accents are accurate and ensure that the actor has been provided lots of training. And also multiracial identities is also something which is increasingly common. If an actor is cast as multiracial, consider weaving that into the background of the storyline. Even if it's a throwaway line, kids in the audiences will feel very seen. And this is something I can relate to, being Black Latino. I often go for roles, I've been cast in roles which are Black or mixed, but I've yet to find one which actually is Black Latino. And it really would be as simple as writing that into a script, having that be a one-line addition, and somehow just alluding to what that character's culture is and why they look the way they look. And so this is just to say there are really subtle, small ways we can allow for more authenticity with these Black characters, which come from a range of communities. And then we have another activity for our guests today. Let's move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So here are some public domain photos from different Black communities. I'd like you all to guess which one belongs to which group. And so we have a Canadian family, American family, Caribbean family. We have, let's see here, Canadian, American, Caribbean, African, and a Black Latino family. And to make it easier on you folks, we can say there's top left, bottom left, middle, top right, bottom right. And I'll comment all the backgrounds as well in the chat box in case anyone missed them.
Come on, somebody wants to take a guess.
All right, let's see here. And remember, folks, pay attention to, the culture. Look at what are they wearing? What's their background? How does that denote where they maybe come from? Complexion, body types. There are many ways we can understand Black individuals' background. Let's see. So we have our first guest, top right, American. Sorry, Renata, no. That is not an American family. You're now one step closer to figuring out what they might be. All right, Kyle is the first correct one. Top right is in fact Caribbean. Oh, everyone's on a roll now. Martha says center Afro-Latino, yes. Top left American, yeah, you got it right, Christine. Lower left Canadian, Christine got 2 in a row. And so that leaves the bottom right, which no one has guessed yet, but naturally through process of elimination. They're an African family, of course. Well done, everyone.
But can we talk about what the indicators were for people? I mean, for the Canadian family, to me, it was because they're wearing sweaters.
And the pine trees in the background, absolutely. Yeah, what were some of the indicators for people? Yep, African family, indeed the clothing. So it sounds so far like it's about environment and clothing. Renata says, I guess wrong based on t-shirts, assumed warm weather was like Florida. Fair guess. That's funny. But typically, yes, clothing, environment, complexion, these are all indicators which might allude to what someone's background might be. The plants, yep, absolutely. I'm Latina. Martha said something. I'm Latina. The features are recognizable to me. Oh, yeah. I hear you there. Cool. All right. Sounds like that's resonated with everyone. I think we can move to the next step. All right. So
No, wrong slide. We're not there yet.
I don't think we're there yet. Okay.
No.
So next up, I'd like for everyone to brainstorm how non-human characters can be designed and voiced to communicate that they are Black.
Because
So how go ahead.
Just want to preface that a little bit, because we've heard quite often that creators are being told that, particularly for preschool, if you have non-humanoid characters, you don't have to deal with representation. But that's not true. And if you heard the conversation that we had yesterday, it's about coding, and you may not even be aware that you're coding characters a certain way, particularly your own identity. So when we are looking at bringing in representation to non-humanoid characters, specifically, the conversation right now is, how do we make sure that they are Black? Are they code Black?
Thanks for prefacing that, to share a little bit more context. So yeah, how can we denote that non-human characters are in fact Black? And think back to our previous exercise, where we were able to see that there are a lot of ways to indicate someone's culture, more than just complexion, right? It's also about environment, also about clothing. Let's see here. We already have some people jumping in the comments. Accents, nice. That's certainly one way of doing it for sure. Cadensive speech, yeah. So accent, speech, it's all leaning into culture. Absolutely. Fur, hair, texture. Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, because there's many different types of Black hairstyles. You could have characters with afros or dreads or a buzz cut. Deep surface level cultural representations, talking their own languages. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, what it sounds like what everyone's agreeing upon is how there are many ways to show the nuances of a particular Black community. For instance, like with Black Latinos, big part of our culture is singing and dancing and cooking. So you could have a Black Latino tree frog, which may do that. A great example I always like to bring up is the film Rio, as it's the animated film. And that features a lot of Brazilian song and dance. And although the film follows mainly animals, it does do a great job of showcasing that Brazilian culture. And from that, you're able to understand the different types of Black communities within Brazil they are trying to personify. Dominican Asian, nice. Cool. Everyone's on the ball with this one. Excellent. And so in any way, would we perhaps posit that any of the examples we've come up with are stereotypes? And can those stereotypes be subverted, or do they need to be thrown out?
Maybe we should just start off with throwing out there, what are some of the common stereotypes of Black characters?
What are some of the stereotypes? Athletes, yep. The assumption we're always athletic. Unfortunate negative one, the drug dealer, of course. Hip hop, yep. The angry Black woman stereotype, of course, yep. Sassy, aggressive. It's interesting how a stereotype like hip hop is one which can be viewed as negative, but if you were to have a different kind of music, which is seldom seen reflective of the Black community, such as looking at the Rio film example, using Brazilian song and dance, that's something which is, because it hasn't been seen, would be more embraced and not considered such a stereotype. So that's why it's important to play into different kinds of nuances and not just repeat the same type of representation or expression that has for too long been just associated with a community. The video vixen, yep. And what are some ways we can subvert these stereotypes then? Like assuming Black characters are always into hip hop, perhaps that they're angry or aggressive, the idea that they're always athletes. So can we think of some adjectives to denote what a unique and more accurate reflection of a Black character could be in media? For instance, are they smart? Are they more artistic? What are some examples of how we can subvert these stereotypes? Sabine commented, show that we are multifaceted. Agreed. Yeah, or you can blend a stereotype with something which is a unique and accurate reflection of the Black community. So if you're, for instance, if you want a character who's into hip hop, also show that they're smart. Maybe they're a math whiz, or maybe they rap about different math equations. Like there are ways to sort of play into the stereotypes, but also subvert them as well.
And maybe we should move on to stereotypes and stories. So one of the directives is, that we see Black Canadians across the country, as I said, Lethbridge and Moncton, They're not always urban centers. So what other stories could we have?
Fantasy worlds, Josiane commented. That's interesting. I think genre is a great way to feature Black representation. If you look at, for instance, Afrofuturism with projects like Black Panther, that's a great way to start a conversation about the Black experience, while also just using genre as a way to entertain audiences, whether they're Black or not. Someone else commented, Sabine commented, a rural environment. That's true. We often don't see that. There are many Black cowboys which have existed in Western areas as well. So I think a rural environment would be interesting. Israel commented Afro-surrealism. I would also add, like, having a Black story where the Black character is the hero of the tale, where they're the knight in shining armor, is something that we definitely, I think, need more of. Because oftentimes the Black stories which are greenlit are comedies, they're very slice of life sitcoms, but ones which show us in sort of this heroic action adventure genre are definitely ones which are needed. As they say, you can't be what you can't see. And so if we have positive role models in these, in engrossing tales, I think that will inspire Black kids growing up to take on those roles in their day-to-day life.
And I think this is the time for that slide, the Shuri slide. Because as one of the kids who participated said, they really loved Shuri because she was one of the main characters, one of the smartest people, not in just this movie, but the entire Marvel universe. And how that impacted her, being able to see that, that was huge. I think we can close that now.
Josiane made an interesting point in the comments. Black women and girls are usually depicted in roles aligned with different forms of femininity, like princesses and fairies. So yeah, it's a great thing to have Black women and girls featured as, scientists, genius, warriors. That's a great way to subvert the stereotype as well. And so can we think of like shows where Black characters are secondary, but also what would it have looked like if the story had switched to them being the lead? For instance, I know someone previously had mentioned Hey Arnold. I forget the name of the Black character in it, but he's the Black best friend. What would a show like that look like if he was the lead? How would the perspective shift? And you can use other shows as well, not limited to just that one. For instance, do we think that the show would have shifted altogether? Would it have stayed remotely the same? Would the tone have shifted? Would it have been more comedic or more serious?
Well, I think what we're trying to get at here is that there are creative opportunities if you just think in a different way to the way that children's content has been created. When you start to center these characters that have always been on the side, there are new ways of telling the story, or new stories that you can tell.
Mm-hmm. And Josiane made a great point on that note of how there would be a greater focus on family dynamics and what takes place inside the family unit. Absolutely.
Well, I was just thinking of like the Little Mermaid, like when they just cast the the mermaid as a black actress, and just the controversy of it. But it's like the same story, and I guess I think like we we want to say that it's going to do well, the show's going to be great, but like then you're just going to get the same people that are like, oh, you're trying to be woke, by making the main character black. So I guess it just, what do you think of that movie, which is like the character doesn't, it's not about her being black, it's just the same story. Everyone knows Little Mermaid, right? But it seems to be creating some controversy, but it's just more the louder people, who are saying, well, why do you have to take our story, make a new princess, but why do you have to take because the redhead princess and make her black? This is my, I guess it's more of a wanting to know what people's thoughts are, because I feel like it always seems to be interpreted as if, oh, you're just trying to do it to make people angry.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a very interesting topic. I'd love to get everyone's thoughts on that one as well. What do we think about taking traditionally white characters from iconic IP and making them black in order to check the representation box, in order to be more inclusive? Let's not decide what the motive is just yet. What are people's thoughts on that? So I know for myself, well, for instance, with the Little Mermaid, while I do appreciate what they're doing, and I think it's coming from a genuine place of wanting that representation, I do think it does a disservice to all the Black creators who do have the next idea for the Little Mermaid, or do have the idea for the next James Bond or Superman. Instead of making these characters Black, it would be much better to allow the creators of this new iconic character be from that community. Because then it just becomes something where you have executives and decision makers, the people with the money, ultimately, not really sharing the power, not really sharing the control over how that character is represented, which is diverse. So that's my take on it personally. That said, if they called me to direct The Little Mermaid and it was a Black-led character, I think my position on it would shift a bit. I'm not going to lie, but generally speaking, if I could have my own way with it, I would say let's really make an effort to have Black characters in these blockbuster, behemoth projects be from underrepresented creators who do have the next best thing, but just haven't been given that opportunity. And yeah, anyone feel free to jump in.
I think it depends. Like, to me, I don't know. I mean, obviously we haven't seen The Little Mermaid yet, so we don't know yet. Like, is she just, gonna just be Black, but nobody mentions it? Like, there are those movies. Or is it gonna be like, it could be really well done. Like, I really liked the Cinderella one with Brandy. Because it just depends on how the story is interpreted, and I think it's important, represent it. It's like you're still happy to see diversity, but was it done correctly? I'm not sure, but I think it's just interesting, the reaction to it. So yeah, love to hear other people's thoughts on it.
Well, Disney did Tiana, which was recognized for being the Disney first Black African American. And what I like, they did the story in New Orleans, where there's a really strong Black community, a mix of Creole and Louisiana. So that really was really interesting, because that was the first time I saw, like, very similar to Cinderella. And it has, I'm French Canadian, and I grew up in Ontario, so that's a mix that's coming. And also we can't go, for me, it's like we gotta go almost the opposite way to show that, yes, you could be smart and also love hip hop, or you could be a skater. I remember some of my Black friends were skater, but it was not cool for Black kids to be skater, something that was completely opposite and love grunge and everything. We are a mix. We need to, well, personally, that's what I try to do. It's go to the opposite way. It doesn't take away our culture. It doesn't take away who we are, and also to reflect that we are Canadian, because we are very different from Americans. So this is what we need to reflect in our stories, the multifaceted aspect of being a Afro-Canadian, Afro-descendant, because we are a mix of many things. My mother tongue is French, but when I'm talking to my mom, it's in Spanish. I'm talking to my father, it's in Creole. So it's a reality, and it's a reality that we don't see. And one of the things that I'd like to push is in storylines that a lot of the time you see the kid talking to the parents in English. That's not a reality. If you're an immigrant, you talk Creole or you talk French, and it doesn't take away in the story. And there's a lot of, I think, Latinos in the States are doing that very well, where the show is in English, but there's bits and parts in Spanish. And that's such a reality. That's why you connect with the story. Even though you don't understand Spanish, you understand that they're talking in their mother tongue, because that's how you would express yourself. And that makes it real authentic. And people are learning another language as much as appreciating the storyline. So I think we could do that in Canada. And I love what Kelly did at the beginning with the stats. Canada is changing, and Africans are taking, I see it in Ottawa, Gatineau, and it is a reality, and it's pretty much all over Canada. And I'm the producer of a TV show where I saw a lot of Native mixed with Black people, Caribbean people. That's another reality. So I think as creators around the table, we need to push the boundaries. Even gender, that's really important. That's all I'm saying for now.
Great. No, great point. I mean, I think what you highlighted, especially, which really resonates with me, is the idea that if you're going to do sort of a race swap, so to speak, of taking a white character and making it Black, have their culture inform the story. Don't erase that culture, because you're just doing a disservice to the community. And yeah, no, I remember watching Princess and the Frog when I was younger, and I really dug it, because it was reflective of that New Orleans vibe, and it was authentic. It was authentic, and I think that's what's most important. We'll see if the Little Mermaid lives up to it as well.
But I think Renata's made a good point that, and when Canada being afraid of accents in different languages, I'm not sure the audience is.
The broadcasters, sorry, I should have specified. The broadcasters of Canada are still very much like, oh, I sense an accent. Like, can you de-accent that? And or like, oh, I thought I heard another language there. I guess they're just worried about, I guess in kids stuff, it's like worried about subtitles and worried about like other people not being able to understand. So it's like, oh, that's a cool accent, but my kid won't necessarily be able to understand that accent. But it's like, instead of teaching, in the classrooms, there are different accents, and we all do understand each other, and we all speak differently, and we all understand it. So then on our TV, why are we erasing accents and different dialects? Anyways, that's my statement of the day.
I think that's an important one, because we are heavily, we've got such a large population of immigrants and newcomers, and the kids growing up are aware of that. Their teachers have accents. They're the, other kids in the classroom, the neighbor down the street. So if they can handle it, I don't understand.
Some of our favorite characters growing up on TV had accents. Little did we know they were just white people with accents, but but we loved them because, like Sebastian, for example, we all loved Sebastian. I think at least I did anyway. We all loved Sebastian because he had an accent and he spoke differently, and he was cool, and like, I don't know. So we do need to realize and embrace authentic accents.
I'll add, it's a reality even in the French community. When you see Canada, French Canadian and Quebec don't speak the same one in Ontario and Eastern Canada. So it is a reality, and we are tinted with English the more you're away from Quebec. So I think we should celebrate those accents and make it the beauty of Canada. And as creator, I think that's what I try to show, because it is a reality. If you go to in a backyard, in a school backyard, you'll hear a whole bunch of different accents, and people are very comfortable with it.
Josanne, did you want to jump in? I just saw your hand was raised.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think
No
this has
problem.
to do with the concept of adapting properties that maybe did not feature diversity. We have to be so careful about the stories that we are choosing to bring into this new generation of viewers, because although there might be a property with a protagonist who challenged stereotypes that were an issue for a certain racial group, it might not pose the same issue for like an underrepresented racial group. So for example, my previous comment in the chat was about Black women and girls being represented as fairies and princesses. In the past, we really have not been represented in traditionally feminine roles. And so while, you know, traditional damsel in distress might be an issue that's being broken down for white audiences, it actually can be empowering to see Black princesses. And so if we're adapting a property where there's like a really tough white female character, if you're making it a Black protagonist, you just want to be careful of that context and not reinforce strong Black women stereotypes when you do that.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I think that goes to researching. Yeah, it's not just throwing in a different skin tone or character. You have to actually do the work to understand the context.
Martha, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Renata was saying about accents. As somebody that has an accent and lives with a 4-year-old, the more she's exposed to my way of speaking and others, the more she understands. So it's, you know, it's not the kids that won't understand us, it's the adults making those choices for the kids. So I just wanted to say that it's about exposure and understanding.
And normalizing, you know, like it's not making you other, and just as much of a part of the fabric of society as everybody else.
Exactly.
No, that's very true. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I grew up in a Spanish-speaking household. My mom doesn't have an accent in English. My dad does. And I didn't grow up with an accent at all, you know, so that I think that's just a testament to how like kids can grow up in multicultural environments and not necessarily pick up an accent or pick up something which will maybe make them feel othered. So yeah, I think that definitely subverts the concerns of broadcasters who may think that you may be influencing the kids or making them take on something which may impact them long term. That definitely wasn't the case in my life.
Or that they won't learn English, you know, as they're watching, or like there's going to be some sort of disconnect between the messages that they're trying to put on TV. So like there is none of that. Again, there's a gazillion immigrant families here that are, you know, talking to kids in accents, and it's not really affecting them. So yeah, I needed to say that. This is part of my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And Renata made an interesting point as well in the comments, just saying how don't just give the accents to the people of color on TV, white people have accents as well. And you know, that's a great point, because often when we think of Australian or British people, we like immediately it's just assumed, oh, they're exotic, they're intelligent, you know, it's never seen as a negative. Whereas we think of Jamaican accents, for instance, as being very eccentric and different. And yeah, that it shouldn't be seen as something which is separate. All accents are one and the same, and none is sort of better than the other or more eloquent than the other. And so yeah, that representation is definitely important.
Do we want to, like, we've already hit 3 o'clock, but this has been a great conversation. Hadiel, do you want to quickly go through the last topic, which was hair and makeup?
Absolutely, yeah. So the directive for this one was that it's important to ensure that authentic representation extends to equal treatment of Black performers, so that they have hair and makeup artists trained in Black hair and skin tones. And did you want to add to that, Kelly Lynn?
Well, it's about the whole crew experience, because when you have especially young Black performers, it's getting their hair and makeup, which there's been a lot of conversation about adult hair and makeup, but it starts with the young performers as well, but also other people on the set. Are they being lit right? Are they being shot right? You know, like, how many times are you seeing the Black performers hiding in the dark corners of the room because they're not being lit right? And then it's about the comfort level of these performers in if they're the Black performer in an all white crew, how comfortable is that? Or how are they then feeling that that's what the industry is? So this is, again, something that we have to consider. And it's not just about, we're going to cast this kid, we're going to tell the story, but it's everything around them. Yeah,
that's a great point. And I have a bit of an anecdote that that reflects that point as well. So I was on a series wherein part of being an actor is, you get your makeup, your hair touched up. And if you're Black, typically what they do is a lineup, which is where they line up your hairline, make it look spiffy, so you look great on camera. And on this particular show, that's something which happened, about every day I'd go onto set. And I was fairly young at the time. And I remember after, this happening for several weeks, I went to my barber, Black man, and he was just aghast at what had happened to my hairline. I remember him going, well, what is your hairline doing? Like a whole 3 inches back. You're not going to have any hair when you're older if you keep this up. What have they done to you? And it just made me realize that because there wasn't that level of representation on the set, people who didn't know how to interact and properly groom Black hair, I could look completely different today, and that could have hurt my confidence. And I think it also just reflects the fact that when you're young and you're in this industry, you're impressionable, you assume that things are the norm and don't really question it. And that can actually be a domino effect where we're not then, challenging individuals and showcasing more inclusivity within the industry as well. And so, yeah, that's all just to say that when there's a lack of representation behind the scenes, it can impact Black children, Black performers. And so we should think of ways to allow them to be more comfortable, and that naturally will result in hiring more Black hair and makeup artists. And then more authentic performances from those actors, because they are as comfortable in their role, in their work environment as the other performers. Absolutely. So we've gone over, it's been a really terrific conversation. I just want to thank everybody. I'm glad that people felt comfortable in the chat as well as talking on screen. Thank you very much to Hadiel for facilitating this with me. And so we have three more after this: people of color communities, 2S LGBTQIA plus communities, and people with disabilities communities. I think there's some spots still if you want to join. And then, of course, this will be recorded, so you can, whichever ones you miss, you can pick up later. So thank you all. Thanks for having me. I learned lots.